Dear friends, welcome. Thank you for joining us to another new cycle of our lectures in our pre-chamber lecture series. Tonight, we would like to go into this subject matter on what is Gnosis. Well, in reality, the real title of this lecture is Gnostic Wisdom. And yes, we're going to cover that, but we would like to take it even a little further, expanding on the content of what has been written by Master Samael Aumbeor. And let's go ahead and expand a little bit on what exactly is this thing called Gnosis and what is the Gnostic wisdom. And let's go ahead and see some different histories on the creation of the world. The history of the creation of the world is the same across time, across cultures, and across people. You're going to see that there are some variations in the symbols. And even though there are some changes and some slight differences in the symbology, it is important that you know that those symbols change so that we can accommodate the level of being and the idiosyncrasies of those who are receiving the teaching. As the great masters offer this wisdom, well, the wisdom is tailored so that those who are receiving it, that they can extract from it what is allowable under their current level of being. And we would like to look at two different scenarios on the stories of creation. First, we're going to look at those stories that have been passed on throughout many generations in the written literature. And we would also like to look at the same story, but the one that has been passed on from lips to ear across many generations as well. If we start with the Judeo-Christian tradition, we will see that this creation of the story of the Garden of Eden is a biblical story, and we can find it in the book of Genesis. According to the story, well, God created Adam and Eve, and he placed them in the Garden of Eden. And right there, they were given free will. They were allowed to eat from any tree in the garden except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when these two characters disobeyed that mandate and they consumed of the fruit of the tree of good and evil, they gained a knowledge of good and evil that, according to the writings, well, gave them the same knowledge that the gods had. And as a consequence, they were subsequently expelled from the garden. What we see here is that there is a place in which some beings were able to live in the utmost happiness. Everything was within their reach, and yet there were some things that they were asked not to do. They did it, and after they did it, well, they lost all of that abundance, all of that happiness, and they had to adapt themselves into a new way of existence. Now look how the same story appears in the Quran. In the Islamic version, we see that there is a Garden of Eden known as a Jannah. And according to the version in the Quran, Adam and Eve were the first humans, and they were created by Allah, by God. They lived in Jannah. Jannah was a paradise, and it was abundant in resources. But Adam and Eve disobeyed Allah's command, and they were expelled from the garden. Two completely different cultures, and here we see a very similar story. So let's move a little bit away from this area of the world, and let's move farther west and look what we see in terms of the story of Garden of Eden in the prose era, in the poetic eras. In the Norse mythology, the equivalent of the Garden of Eden is Asgard. And Asgard is a heavenly realm of the gods. This means that this is a paradise where divine beings exist and they have strong communion with each other. According to the story, the first humans, Adam and Eve, were created by the gods, and these first humans lived in Asgard. And they were free from suffering, and they had everything they needed. It was happiness, there was abundance. However, they were eventually cast out of Asgard and sent to the mortal world. They existed in this condition, and they were sent from this paradise and into the mortal world. They were expelled from the garden. 3 distinct stories. Notice how similar this is. Now, this is not by coincidence. It is simply because this is suggesting there is a wisdom here. And in our current condition, well, we have to understand from where is it that each one of us comes from, so that we can understand what was the mistake that we made. Because in the thinking that if you modify the cause, if you change the cause, you modify the effect. And this can bring us back into this better condition of greater happiness, of a place where we can coexist in communion with the gods, with faculties that can possibly allow us to interact, communicate better with them. So this is what has been written. But the story is so profound and powerful that as we share with you the versions of the story that have been passed on from lips to ear, it has barely changed. In the Hindu version, the story of the Garden of Eden, well, it is slightly different, but it has very similar themes. In Hinduism, there is a story of the Garden of Paradise. And right there were some first humans that lived in a state of bliss. Again, the state of bliss is a state of tremendous happiness. However, they were eventually expelled from the garden because of their actions. And they were sent to the physical world, where they would have to face the challenges and learn valuable lessons so that they could make their way back. Notice how in the Hindu tradition, in Hinduism, they speak about how is it that they were sent to the physical world, a realm that energetically is denser. Of course, there is a different type of vibration because the energy is condensed different here than what would be in the higher realms of consciousness. And last, in the African mythology version, where we see the story also passed through generations from lips to ear, we see that the Garden of Eden is also depicted as a place of great abundance and happiness. In some cultures, they state that the first humans lived in a state of balance, of equanimity, of harmony with nature. But eventually, they were forced to leave because of their own actions, because of the actions of the gods, of the enforcement of those actions by the gods. And the story of the Garden of Eden in African mythology, well, even though it varies a little bit from culture to culture, notice that it brings the same elements of knowledge and suffering. Again, this is so rich in content, and it is so important that we see this. Because regardless of where we find ourselves in the world, the teaching that comes across is the same. Samael says the basic principles of the great universal wisdom are always identical. They contain the very same cosmic principles, which are universal and impersonal. Universal meaning that they apply the same to all of us. And impersonal, that regardless of who you are, of where you may be, that there is a fundamental teaching that applies to you regardless of your race or religion or your place of origin or your sexual preference or any of that. And the beauty about this is that Gnosis comes to share and educate us on the meaning of these symbols, on the way in which we can interpret this so that we can extract this wisdom and effectively apply it into our lives to see a change. Because after all, the purpose of Gnosis is the transformation of man. Whenever we say man, in this lecture, and in the many other lectures that we have, man is being used as an epicene noun. That means that it means both men and women. It is an all-inclusive noun. So the purpose of Gnosis is induce change, but not change for the sake of change itself. Change for the sake of transformation. And Samael tells us Gnosis is a cosmic teaching that leads to the restitution within each person within each person of the ability to live consciously and intelligently. It says cosmic. Cosmos means order of worlds. Cosmos indicates that there is harmony, that there is good order within many interdependencies. And as a teaching that brings harmony, this harmoniousness, this new balance brings restitution. It brings the ability of each person who decides to take this teaching and apply it into their lives to live a life in a way that is conscious. I would like to direct your attention to the image that we have on the right. Notice this image also is making an allusion into the creation of man, provided that this image is from several hundred years ago during the times of the Renaissance. This is alchemical art. And notice that in this picture, we are seeing that there are two trees, just as there were two trees in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, one tree was a tree of life, and the other one was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Here we see a tree that is the tree of the sun, and we also see a tree that is the tree of the moon. And these two trees, each one has 7 spheres. The one on the left, which is the tree of the sun, has 6 spheres. The 7th sphere is on the hands of the man. And there are 3 additional spheres that are not presented here because those are 3 additional spheres that correspond to those 3 primary forces of creation, namely the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, perhaps Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Man and woman, right here in this garden, they are fused together. And they are fused together for a very specific reason. This man and this woman is an individual. They are a single character, identical to the first creation of man that we find in chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, where it reads that God created man in its likeness and image. It says male and female, he created them. And it's not saying that they were men and women as we see today, with each one with their individual and particular sexuality, but that these beings were divine. And this indicates that there was a perfect balance between the masculine and the feminine principles in each one of them. Notice that the man is able to hold on to the sun. And the sun here is a symbol of those forces, not only that nourish, but the light that illuminates the path of those who are seeking an internal transformation. And the woman is holding on to this dragon. If we were to look at this dragon as a reptile, this dragon is very similar to the serpent in the Garden of Eden. So the woman here is powerful enough. You can see the power because they are wearing a crown. The crown is red, which is a symbol of a very deep spirituality. And she is holding onto this dragon, showing 2 things. The first one, that if this dragon, we were to see it as a source of temptation, she stands over temptation and she can dominate it. She can control it. On a second aspect, we can see this dragon as a source of wisdom. And as a dragon of wisdom, then she holds the dragon of wisdom because she has earned it. And this man and this woman are fused together. And the key to their union stands at the very top of their head, over their crown. And you will see that right there is a symbol of a cross. This symbol is indicating a union. It's indicating that there is a vertical path to transformation. It is speaking that there is a specific magic that we perhaps can refer to as the magic of love, that when this man and this woman come together, as she embraces the wisdom, as she is able to overcome temptation, as he is able to receive that solar light that can bring life and nourishment, they can both transform themselves. But there is much veiled and secret behind this image. Many of these symbols were shared like this in the Middle Ages, because back then, if you were seen or considered as a pagan, as a heretic, well, you would have to pay with your life. So this teaching, exactly as it is shown in the book of the creation of the world, the Garden of Eden, is all hidden right here. But now, ever since the arrival of the new age of Aquarius, we are so fortunate that all of this wisdom has been made openly available to anyone who is seeking it. And Samael says, Gnosis emerges in times of crisis, in times of social and spiritual unrest. And all it takes from us is just a little bit of observation so that we can see the social unrest that exists around us. So there is no surprise here. Samael closes by saying, this universal wisdom is always the same. Only its aspects will change according to the peoples, their nations, and their language. And this is why we see that there are similar symbols, whether it's in the documented stories, in the tradition that is passed from lips to ear, or in the art that we get from the years of the Middle Ages, where the great alchemists used to share their knowledge. This wisdom of Gnosis, the way that it leads man into a transformation, is by guiding men into introspection, into looking at themselves, into understanding the way they think, the way they feel and experience emotions, the way they think, the way they feel and experience emotions, the way they behave within themselves, with their family, with their spouse, with their community, etc. And this fundamental tenet, this fundamental teaching, is what was written at the very doors of the temple of Apollo at Delphi. That engraving, that teaching stated, Gnosis te ipsum. Gnosis te ipsum means, man, know yourself. Man, know thyself. But beyond that, it is saying, man, know thyself so that you may know the universe, so that you may know the gods. And this is the purpose of Gnosis. It is to teach us how is it that we can learn to observe ourselves so that we can understand the limitations that have been developed within our own psyche, so that as we work to eliminate anything that is inferior, as it is stated in the Hermetic science, we eliminate, remove, transform the unworthy that exists within us so that it becomes worthy of receiving values and virtues and faculties and powers. Dear friends, Gnosis is being given to us freely with the arrival of this revolutionary new age of Aquarius, with the purpose of us being able to come together, to reunite. Gnosis is here so that we can bond once again. But it's not only bond and come together as a humanity. Yeah, because yes, that is important. There has to be harmony. There has to be kindness. There has to be compassion so that we can all live together. But also, it is there so that there can be a bonding, a bringing together, a reunion that takes place internally within the hearts of men. And to be able to achieve that union of this soul that we carry within to that great source that some of you may call God, some of you may call spirit, Gnosis works on a very consistent mode of operation. And that is to empower you to be assisted by powers that are superior to the mind, by forces that exist beyond what the physical senses of your organism can perceive. By working with these superior forces, we could refer to them as elemental devas of creation. We could refer to them as the elementals of the creatures of the plant kingdom, etc. Well, these are all forces that exist that you can work with in such a way that you can bring healing to your body when your body is suffering ailments, when it is suffering maladies. That you can bring healing to relationships by establishing harmony, friendship, so that you can help create the right influence so that there is gravitation towards condition of kindness and service and compassion and love. And we have already said so much. I mean, we have already spoken about the purpose. We're already spoken about how is it that Gnosis works. But what is this? What is this thing Gnosis? Well, let's start by saying that Gnosis is not a religion. Gnosis is not a religion, but rather the wisdom that stands as the foundation of all of the world's great religions. If we can quote a great instructor we once heard say, Gnosis is the root wisdom of all of the world's great religions. And as the root wisdom of all of the world's great religions, this is why we find so many similarities in all of these stories. These similarities are not because one religion is better than another one and that one is stealing from that one. Certainly not. This is a root wisdom that because it stands as the foundation of all of the world's great religions, the universal principles that are presented are shown exactly in the same way, regardless of where you look, with the difference that now the symbols change so that those at those specific locations, based on their level of morality, that we prefer to say the level of being, can perceive them and they can extract the wisdom that they need. But some people think of Gnosis as religion. And from a devotional practice, from the conditions that we see today on fanatical devotion, on blind devotion, well, certainly Gnosis has nothing to do with that. But if we were to look at the origin of the word religion, the word religion comes from a Latin root word, religare. Religare, to reunite. It is to bond, to unite. So religion in reality means to bond or unite. And that is the same as yoga, which comes from a very ancient Proto-Indo-European root, yug. And yug means union. So if you, speaking from this very original meaning of the words, if you say religion, religare, or yoga, yug, you're speaking of the same thing. You're speaking about something that helps bring things back together. And that bringing together is the reunion of your consciousness, your essence. That divine material that exists within you, that aspect of your own spirit, of your innermost, that you have incarnated within you, that consciousness, to reunite it with the source of creation itself. Now, knowing now that Gnosis is not a quote-unquote religion in terms of blind devotion or fanatical practices, etc., well, Gnosis is many things. So Gnosis is knowledge and it is wisdom, but it is also insight. It is also comprehension. It is also a philosophy, but it is also something that is mystical. Gnosis is also something that is a reflection of beauty and aesthetics, art. And in Gnosis, well, we also find that there is much of it that is science. Science, not like what we perceive in terms of labs and beakers and chemical formulas, but science from the perspective of the understanding of the phenomena of nature by virtue of its causes and effects. That is a very deep meaning of science. Understanding of the phenomena of nature by virtue of their causes and effects. In there we find Gnosis. Gnosis is a teaching. Gnosis is a didactic. You see, Gnosis is all of these things. And Gnosis, as it is delivered, well, there are different levels of profoundness in Gnosis. Just as there are different levels of education in any degree that you may choose to study. I mean, as you go through your education in life, you may go through your elementary and your high school, and by then you have completed a very basic foundation of education. You may decide to go into a higher level of education and decide to do a bachelor's in science or a bachelor's in arts. And that gives you a further deeper level of education in some very specific subject matters. And you can perhaps take it into some very advanced levels. Advanced levels like masters, like doctorates, whether it's a doctor in education or a doctor in medicine or a doctor in jurisprudence or a doctor in philosophy. But by the time that you get to those very advanced levels, well, the level of responsibility that comes to you with having all of that knowledge now sets on you the responsibility, perhaps the additional ability to even help unveil more information. The same thing happens with Gnosis. All of this knowledge, insights, ability to comprehend elements of philosophy, mysticism, art, science, etc., all of this is delivered in 3 very specific levels. And these 3 levels are very aligned to the levels of study of the ancient schools of mysteries, whether the schools of Mithra or the schools of Egypt. And there is a first level, which is a public level. In the public level, well, we learn much information that helps us create a solid cultural foundation. Cultural foundation that is very important, so that as a solid foundation, it's strong enough to withstand the weight and the responsibility of the additional teachings that you can receive in the intermediate and the advanced levels. Once we walk into the intermediate levels, it is here at this more profound level of study where students learn about the magic of nature. They start learning how to operate with these invisible forces of nature and creation. They learn about elemental magic, but they also learn in depth the practices of meditation, work with the chakras. And at the end of this intermediate level, then there is an unveiling of a deep mystery where the students of the intermediate levels, or the first chamber, they are able then to learn how to profoundly transmute creative energies that exist within our bodies, in our body, in your body, and in everyone else's. They learn about the great mystery on how to transmute these creative energies and under which conditions, so that we can awaken a fire that is known as the fire of Kundalini. And as this fire is awakened, with its awakening comes the crystallization of further virtues, abilities, laws. All of these things that when you put them together, they synthesize into a soul that is radiant, a soul that irradiates with the splendor of 1,000 suns. And as they transition from the intermediate level into the more advanced levels, what we see happen is that we go even deeper into the understanding, the practice, the comprehension of all of these works. These 3 levels of study, well, we all eventually go through each one of them. But regardless of the level of study, each one of them has its exoteric and its esoteric aspects. Exoteric means that it is facing outward. It means that it is exposed on the outside. Exoteric teachings, well, are teachings that can be shared with anyone once they enter into each one of these levels, into each one of these chambers. And these are, well, subject matters that they are relatively easy to comprehend. They are not too complex in nature. And it helps to receive the wisdom because it helps clarify questions that you may have had for so long. Doubts that you may have been carrying within your memory for a long time. And the moment that you start receiving this information, all of those misconceptions, all of those doubts, all of those questions start becoming answered. You start going through different periods of aha moments where internally you start feeling that expansion. And each one of those micro moments of expansion, when you start putting them together, they start accounting for this greater phenomena that is known as the awakening of the consciousness. And once you have received the exoteric teaching that corresponds to this, that, or the other chamber, then there is also an esoteric aspect that is also given to you. Esoteric means that it is hidden from the public view. It means that the teaching, once you receive it, it becomes very private. It means that as you apply it within you with the greatest self-sincerity and with a great deal of rigor. And the combination of those esoteric and exoteric teachings, well, as you go from one chamber to the next, allow you to expand on your knowledge so that you can synthesize that knowledge as wisdom. Because yes, we spoke of knowledge, we spoke of wisdom, but not everybody understands the difference between one and the other. So let's go ahead and clarify this so that we all benefit. Let's start by saying that Gnosis and wisdom are intimately related, but they are different from one another. When we speak of knowledge, we're speaking about information. We're speaking about the ability of someone to receive that information and understand it. But this is information that for you to receive it and understand it, you have to subject yourself to the exercise of studying. Now, we don't want you to be thinking exclusively of studying as in sitting in front of a desk and forcing yourself to read and memorize things. Because yes, that is a way to acquire knowledge, but that is too superficial. Here, we're speaking about studying because you are able to bring an element of your consciousness and make it capable of perceiving and receiving that information. As you receive that information and you integrate it, you start understanding it. And as you understand it, you can go through experiences that are more conscious. And those additional experiences of consciousness, they add together into this greater phenomena that we mentioned earlier, is the awakening of the consciousness. You can study by reading, you can study by listening, you can study by observing. But nevertheless, you are opening your senses to receive. You are allowing your faculty of concept to help you understand and that you can see the experience of that knowledge in your life. The foundation of knowledge is just what you know. And we know that there are many people who have plenty of information accumulated in their memory records. They can speak of things and even recite you books, but that is the limit of what they can do with it. They have great knowledge, but they have yet to transition into the state of wisdom. And wisdom is the application of that knowledge. It's how you apply that knowledge to your life, how you apply that knowledge into your world. How is it that that knowledge, you put it to play in good judgment? How is it that you apply conscious discernment on how that knowledge is being used? So the difference between wisdom and knowledge is that when it comes to wisdom, you have taken that information that you have acquired, that knowledge that you have earned based on those efforts, And what is it that you can do with it? Because of the quality of your reflection. What you have reflected on how to adapt and apply that knowledge to your life and to the world, that is wisdom. And it's applying it, yes, to the world outside of you, but also to those inner worlds, to those inner spaces of consciousness that exist within each and every one of us. Now, Gnosis is structured around 4 major pillars. These 4 pillars of Gnosis are philosophy, science, art, and mysticism. The pillar of philosophy in Gnosis, well, philosophy, we know that it literally means the love for wisdom. It seeks to share with you deeper level of thinking so that you can expand on your quality of thought. Gnosis does not tell you what to think, but it teaches you how to think, and how to think from the perspective of inquiring, analyzing, reflecting, and then experiencing, so that you can embrace the information that you receive, and as you integrate it, that you can translate that into a wisdom, a wisdom by virtue of how is it that you can apply and use that in your daily life to affect a transformation. Then there is the pillar of science. And again, this pillar of science is seeking to make you aware of the chains of causes and effects that govern all of the phenomena of nature. Again, the understanding of these phenomena that surround us by virtue of their causes and effects. As a science, Gnosis gives you the right knowledge so that you can go back and look at your causes, those causes that you have crystallized in your life, and by modifying them, that you can change the effects, that you can transition into higher levels of being where internally and externally the conditions, the circumstances are so much more favorable, not only for you to exercise this work of transformation, but also for you to move on, shedding all that you're carrying within that really has become a burden. Things like our angers and our ambitions and our envies and our gluttonies, etc., etc. Because by shedding those things that are what is known in Hermetic science as unworthy, that we can transform those into something that is worthy, meaning virtues. Virtues like temperance, kindness, compassion, tolerance, love, etc. There is a pillar of art. And as part of the pillar of art, Gnosis brings anthropology. The ability to study all of these legacies from the ancient culture so that we can see those symbols, whether it is symbols in a work of literary art or in a play of theater, or whether it is carvings on a stone, images on a codex. And as we see this, that we can interpret the relationship of the symbols in the context in which they are presented, so that each one of us can extract the gnosis, can extract that wisdom from each one of them. And as you extract it and integrate it, that again, you can apply it for the transformation that you are seeking, the internal change that you seek. And last but not least, there is a pillar of mysticism, a pillar of mystical practices. As you transition into higher chambers and you start learning to work with the different forces of nature, well, there are specific actions that must be taken. There is a veneration, there is a respect that must be had for all of these practices, and all of that is included in this pillar of mysticism. These 4 pillars of knowledge come together, and Gnosis in its many aspects as knowledge, wisdom, insight, comprehension, practices, didactic, teaching, etc. They take you to the door where you can effectively see, who are you? Because this question, who am I, is a question that man has asked himself for millennia. But Gnosis helps expand on the answer to that question, because rather than you look at yourself as a single entity that is made of some combination of flesh, bones, fluids, and some functional aspect of consciousness that many will argue it is the strict product of chemical reactions that take place in the brain, you can start seeing that beyond that, you are in reality a triad, a trinity, a group of three. On one hand, within you, that aspect of you that perceives, that has this sense of being, well, yes, that is a soul. But it is a soul that is incipient in nature. It is a soul that exists within you, that consciousness, we'd better say, that essence, is the divine material that you have been given so that you can fabricate a soul that is truly radiant. What is known in alchemical terms as a solar soul. Remember the image of the man holding onto the sun. A soul that is so radiant, pure, and powerful that it radiates with the intensity of 1,000 suns. And even though you have that soul, and that soul is using your body as an instrument to be able to exist in this realm of a denser vibration, of a condensation of energy that is denser than other places of consciousness. Well, for that body to interact, it needs of an energetic mechanism. And that energetic mechanism is your personality. Gnosis will teach you that there is no need in furthering the personality and making it robust, in perpetuating it, because you're going to learn that the personality becomes a child of its time. It has a beginning and it has an end. And the whole purpose of the personality is just to enable that soul that is within that body to interact with the environment around it. And Gnosis comes to give you the didactic, the practices, the exercises that are necessary so that you can methodically take that personality and use it in ways that are superior. So that you don't summon or you don't surrender your personality to the desires of your angers, to the whims of your revenges, to the gossiping of your prides, etc. And rather, make use of that personality as a fine and delicate instrument of your spirit. And of course, a body. So this triad of soul, personality, and body, they all come together as an instrument for that superior aspect of you, that spirit, to go through this experience and learn from the experience now that it has fallen into a denser condition, so that it can identify the causes of all of its mistakes, change those causes, modify the effects, and make its way back to that Garden of Eden out of which we, at some point, were expelled. But as part of Gnosis, you're going to see as well that it's not just the physical body. As part of Gnosis, you will see that for us to be able to exist in those higher realms of creation, in those superior realms where exist all of these other divine, magnificent beings that we may refer to as angels and archangels, thrones, powers, virtues, dominions, seraphim, cherubim, etc., etc., that there is a need to fabricate vehicles that will allow you to be there and exist in those higher realms of consciousness. And you will come to learn that in terms of body, other than your physical body, that is a body given to you by nature so that you can go through the experience here and work your way back, that there is also an ethereal body or a vital body that keeps this physical body alive. That there is an astral body that operates within the realm of emotions, in the astral realm of creation. that there is also a mental body that you can use to move freely within the mental realm of creation. And beyond that, that there are bodies that you can fabricate so that you can exist within the realm of causes of nature, within the realm of the spiritual soul of the innermost. Perhaps the seventh body and the greatest one would be the fabrication of that ultimate body where the spirit, the innermost of each one of us, is able to dress itself with all of these other creations and move freely along the span of all the manifestations of consciousness. This is who we are. As a humanoid, as an elemental animal with a human body, there is much that exists within each and every one of us in a state of potentiality. There are solar seeds that each one of us has been given, that all it takes is for us to irrigate them, to make the right use of our creative waters to irrigate those seeds so that we can see them sprout as flowers in a garden. Each flower being representative of virtues, faculties, powers, laws, bodies, etc. All of them together, that garden together, becoming then a symbol of that solar radiant soul. So now that you know this, we teach many things in this thing called Gnosis. So what is taught as part of Gnosis? Well, dear friends, we want you to know that we will teach you about Hermetic astrology. This is not the astrology that you will read in a horoscope in a magazine while you're waiting in a doctor's office. When we speak of Hermetic astrology, you will learn that behind every one of these celestial bodies, there is an archetype. That archetype is a primordial intelligence. And that those intelligences, those archetypes, exercise an energetic influence not only over your thoughts and your emotions, but also in your personality. And beyond that, they have specific influences in each one of the days of the week, because as a matter of fact, the 7 days of the week are structured based on the influence of each one of the archetypes of the 7 planets of alchemy. And you will learn how to work with these forces. You will learn how to make the most out of these forces so that your projects, your initiatives, everything that you do, that you can bring it into a successful fruition for the benefit of all those who are around you. We will also teach you about the science of meditation. And how is it that meditation is necessary, not only so that we can learn to sit down and calm down the mind and the emotion, but also meditation as a practice, so that you can extract information, learnings that are unperceivable from the 5 senses of your human machine. We will also teach you about the science of numbers. Numbers as living entities and the impact, the influence that they have in your life. Numbers that dictate what is your internal urgency, what is your fundamental tone. We will teach you on ways in which you can work with these numbers so that you can understand what is going to be the tone of the day, and that you can selectively look ahead to make use of these forces so that you can have your crucial conversations, your very important meetings, your very meaningful life events, whether it is the baptism of your children or your day, or the day of your proposal or the day of your marriage, etc., etc. In addition to that, we will also educate you on how is it that the personality comes to be. We will show you the different stages of the development of the personality, the influence of the archetypes of all of these celestial bodies, these cosmic influences, so that you can understand why is it that your personality is structured the way that it is. But beyond that, so that you can have the right influence in the development of the personality of your children, in the development of the personality of your nieces, your nephews, perhaps the children that live next door. How is it that we can make use of these forces so that as human beings we can grow up to be of more service, be kinder, to be more compassionate? And this is all going to be delivered on a foundation of principles that make up a fundamental education. A foundation that will be strong enough just to sustain the weight of all this extra responsibility that we will be able to exercise by virtue of what we will be able to learn and apply in life. We're also going to teach you about cosmic laws and how these laws, some of them are dictated by celestial mechanics, and others of these cosmic laws, well, how is it that we can work with them so that we can transcend our current condition, so that we can reach higher states of happiness, of bring more success into our daily doings. And we're also going to teach you about chakras. How is it that we can bring balance into the centers? What does it mean when a chakra opens? How is it that we can effectively use our creative energies to awaken the faculties, the powers that come with all of these chakras, and dominion over forces of nature, whether they're the elemental forces of the air, the water, the fire, the earth, but also faculties like clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy, intuition, inspiration, etc., etc. And we're even going to give you more than 25, 30, 35 different keys that you can put into practice so that you can identify how is it that you can best unfold consciously in your astral body, so that you can bring back those memories from your oniric experiences, very conscious memories, into your physical memories, so that you can interpret also the meaning of your dreams, the direction that your spirit is giving you. And friends, all of this we do only as a complement. Those of us who are instructors of the Quetzalcoatl Cultural Institute, as much as the instructors of other organizations, the most we are doing here is helping shed some more light, helping expand on some context, with the purpose of helping you just gather some deeper understanding. But we always invite you to rely on the teaching directly from the source, to read the books of Samael, to listen to his own lectures, to look at his many works as they have been documented, because that is where the true teaching is. And all of this material is available to all of you who may be interested. All of this material is free of cost, and all that it requires is of you to bring of your dedication and of your interest to read, take in this information, and learn to reflect on it so that you can apply it to your life and to your world, the one outside of you, as much as the one within you. And you can find all of this just for you on our page, samaelgnosis.us. So, dear friends, this has been our lecture tonight on what is Gnosis. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here with us this evening, and may all beings be happy.